Hey guys, this is Echo Soundworks and you are checking out a massive tutorial on ADSR sounds. So in this video, we're going to be recreating that bass, this red track that you heard that I soloed there in the little demo. It's kind of like you could use it for a lot of different genres of music. You could use it in pop, hip hop, urban. You could, what I was aiming for when I was kind of creating this was kind of like the new wave, indie dance, indie EDM, which has kind of like the 80s bass synths in it sometimes. So this has a mini Moog or kind of like a Prophet actual sound mixed together. It's pretty cool because it's not super digital sounding. It can be a cool vibey bass that you can use just to create a different color in your songs. And I wanted to share with you a little tip and trick that I like to use using a performer so you can create like a sidechain compression style effect. So right now, it's just straight bass. If I turn this macro up, it sounds like there is some sidechain compression on it. And that's cool for if you kind of want like a more subdued version of a bass or any patch really massive. Like let's say this was the pre-drop or the verse where they're singing. I might sidechain the bass just so when I get to the drop or the bigger part of the song instrumentally, the bass will sound bigger, but it's still there in the context of the song. All right, so let's jump into remaking this. I have a new sound pulled up in Massive. So the actual bass itself isn't hard to make. You could use a few different wavetables to kind of get this sound, but getting that analog-ish vibe is the difficult part in creating the sound. So I'm going to use a instance or two instances of the virtual analog wavetable, and I'm going to detune one to -12 and the other down to -24. Now the reason I like to do this is, to me it sounds a little bit more analog sounding when there's an octave span apart between similar wavetables in Massive. So that sounds more consistent and more digital, so I like to do it with one kind of spread out an octave or sometimes two octaves apart. So let's detune this a little bit to like maybe -23.88 just to give it a little bit more vibe, and I'll turn it down. All right, now with oscillator 3, you don't have to do this to get this sound, but I like to do this a little bit. So I'll add an additive 5 wavetable or any really digital sounding wavetable, tune it down to -12 so it's kind of a companion to oscillator 1. Just turn the amp way the heck down. Just gives it a little bit of digital new, kind of a new EDM sound. So let's now move on to the filters. I'm going to choose low pass 4 and just turn the resonance down. We don't need any resonance with this sound. Now that we have that dialed in, let's go to our voicing tab, which is going to be important for this. I want it to have more than one voice of unison or unisono, so it sounds bigger and thicker, so then I can also use this pitch cutoff slider or this detune. So turn that on and turn this down to maybe about 0.50 or somewhere around there, and then slide this out. What it's doing is it's giving us a nice bit of detune. All right, so now that that's taken care of, we can also turn on this pan position where at full right, the slider at the full right position, the sound's gonna be very, very wide in the stereo field. I don't want too much of that with this because it is a bass, but I do want this bass to be kind of big and present, so I'm going to turn it a little bit to the right, or you could go to the left, depending on your taste, to get a little bit bigger stereo image. All right, so I'm not liking how the filter is playing with this bass right now. For instance, if we solo this sound here, and that's too bright, that's too dark. So our options are to modulate or to create a kind of a filter envelope. So I'm going to do that with my first envelope here. So click on envelope 1 and then create a sound that has, or an envelope shape that has very little attack. Keep the level up, turn the decay down just a pinch, and turn this level down almost all the way. And then we'll modulate the cutoff of our filter out a little bit. So now those frequencies above where this little notch is and in the space in between this blue modulation depth coming from our envelope is being controlled by this shape. So it's not letting through all the filter or all the harmonics and frequencies of the filter. If I turn this level up, it's basically the same thing we just had, but a little bit more controlled. when I didn't even have the modulation. So I like using this to really control the frequencies that I need. All right, and to make the sound a little bit more digital, I don't want a complete analog sound here. I'm going to turn or go to envelope 2 and turn it to linear for its mode type. Turn the attack down, turn the level down, and turn the decay down almost all the way, and turn the attack down all the way. And we're going to use this to modulate the pitch of our oscillators just to give it some kind of a presence on the attack. All right, so that sounds pretty good. So let's turn the cutoff down a little. And then finally, for the envelopes, we do have to go to our 4th envelope because that's what's tied to our amp mod or our output by default. So let's turn the attack down a little bit and turn the release up. All right, and then also if you want to kind of drive the sound a little bit, a classic tube can be a very cool effect. And then we'll even put on, maybe we can put on like a flanger to get more analog sounding with this. All right, and then finally what you can do to actually, with the sound before we get into that sidechain compression effect, I like to do this sometimes with analog emulations in Massive. I'll use maybe random steps, turn the rate really slow. I won't have it synced or tempo synced or anything like that. But I'll turn the amp down a good amount. And then what I'll do is I'll modulate the pan position of the output. And it gets this nice little bounce. If you watch my metering over here in Logic, there is just a very, very subtle amount of movement left and right, which is kind of nice, makes it a little bit more interesting sounding to the ear. All right, let's jump into this idea of creating a sidechain compression style effect. To do that, you need to use a instance of the performer. So I'll just go to my 8th tab or the 8th LFO tab and select performer. But this waveform right here isn't very good for a sidechain compression, and I'll show you that. So if we keep this default shape and I turn this down, my amp of both of my oscillators, or all 3 of my oscillators, sorry, down with this performer, and we'll sync this, maybe do 1/4. Right, it doesn't sound very sidechain compression-like. So I like to use this one curve, go to load curve. If you hold down shift on your keyboard, it'll allow you to keep holding down shift, it'll allow you to keep dragging these in without having to go back constantly and reselect the curve type that you're trying. But you want all these at full velocity, and it should look like that. This will sound a lot better for a sidechain compression style effect. And so uncheck load curve so you can see what's going on. The main thing you need to do is have it synced to a ratio, a musical value, and then make sure you have it set to restart off. You do not want that on. With restart on, it sounds like this. With restart off, it sounds like this. Sounds like sidechain compression. So we don't want this on the sound always. So let's turn the amp down, and we will just create a very simple macro here. I can call it SC for sidechain, or you can, if you're not lazy, you can type the whole thing out if you like. Now we have without the sidechain, with the sidechain. So that sounds really cool in the context of the song. All right, so without the sidechain. So that is the sound, guys. If you have any questions or comments, let me know below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.